So every day, every hour, and every minute, we try our best to all inclusive according to our non-discrimination policy.
Hello and welcome to episode 31 of What's Happening in Myanmar, a weekly show from the Frontier Myanmar podcast family. I'm your host, Luke Corbin. It's Thursday, June 12th. As usual, there's been a lot happening in Myanmar, but today we're going to focus on the Ta'ang in northern Shan State. And to do so, we're joined by Lway Noon, a Ta'ang activist and researcher, and Francesco Buscemi, a post-doctoral fellow in geography at the University of Bologna in Italy. He's also the author of an upcoming book on the Ta'ang National Liberation Army, or TNLA. But before that long chat, I'll quickly go over a couple of news bites from the last week. The first is a resolution adopted by the International Labour Organization that could lead to better things for Myanmar workers. Last Thursday, the ILO adopted a resolution declaring that Myanmar is non-observant of its Freedom of Association and Protection of the Right to Organise Convention and of the Forced Labour Convention. The ILO previously found in 2023 that the State Administration Council, the SAC, uses forced labour and suppresses civil liberties. It called for SAC authorities to stop their crackdowns, respect workers' rights, and cease forced labour. Well, after 2 years of no progress on that front, the ILO has now invoked its Article 33 of its constitution, which allows it to call for action against countries that fail to comply with its resolutions. The ILO proclaimed that countries should ensure their relations with Myanmar, quote, in no way enable, facilitate or prolong the violations of workers' rights in respect of freedom of association and forced labour. It also called for reports on any activities directly or indirectly enabling or abetting labour violations in Myanmar. The National Unity Government, NUG, welcomed this, as did the International Trade Union Confederation, but the SAC, for its part, said the resolution was unfair and politically motivated. Importantly, this resolution is only a call for action. The ILO has no means to enforce its recommendations. And for a little context, the ILO actually invoked the same Article 33 resolution 25 years ago against Myanmar during a different period of economic liberalisation under strict military rule. Now, if you're interested in this story, the outlet Myanmar Now has some interviews and original reporting on it. They released an English language article just yesterday, June 11. And the second bite of news. In the last week, airstrikes across the country have killed at least 11 civilians, including 3 children, and injured close to 60 others. But just as of this Tuesday, there's now one less plane in the skies, as a Myanmar Air Force fighter jet crashed into a village in Lway Township that day, sadly killing 4 people inside a building that was smashed by the plane wreckage. The People's Liberation Army claims that it shot the jet down, and the jet was targeting nearby resistance forces. So that's the PLA, by the way, that's the armed wing of the revived Communist Party of Burma, not the PLA military of the Chinese Communist Party, which does share the same name. The SAC, however, claimed that the jet went down due to engine failure, and it also said that soldiers were on their way to inspect the crash site, which is in an area outside of their control. So far, the SAC has not done that. It's reacted only by bombing the area of the crash, with our National Unity Government administrator reporting that bombs have destroyed houses there and led to 2 further deaths. If we recall, the Kachin Independence Army and its allies destroyed 2 military helicopters just a few weeks ago. So this last month has been an expensive one for the Myanmar Air Force and Army. The jet downed this week is estimated to have cost $8 million. And now, just before going into our Ta'ang discussion, I want to ask, did you know that these stories I've read and many more were first covered by Frontier Myanmar's daily briefing newsletters? These email newsletters are concise, curated accounts of the latest news delivered to the inboxes of Frontier members every weekday. If you're not already a member, please consider joining and lending your support. Our journalists and editors work hard to report accurate and verified information in those daily digests, and they really give you the context you need to make sense of what's happening in Myanmar. Go to frontiermyanmar.net/membership. If you're already a member, thank you so much. Now let's talk Ta'ang. Rumours swirled around northern Shan State this week as the Myanmar military continued pushing to conquer Naung Chau and the road leading north up to Jaltmer and beyond. The TNLA currently controls most of the major towns in northern Shan State, west of Lashio, and therefore it also controls the easiest land routes to China from the dry zone, where military-ruled Mandalay, Naypyidaw, etc. are. The TNLA took most of this recent territory during the Operation 1027 offensives after the coup, in cooperation with People's Defence Forces and the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, the MNDAA. While the PDFs have stood firm in their opposition to the Myanmar military before and since then, the MNDAA hasn't. And this year it ceded most of urban Lashio back to the SAC, citing or under Chinese pressure. Similar pressure has come to bear on the TNLA too, but so far it's produced no such results. The TNLA is withstanding long-standing Chinese border closures and refusing to come to terms with the SAC. TNLA spokesperson Colonel Dar Ban La publicly stated last month, he said, quote, "China's approach has always been no fighting near our border, no fighting along our gas pipeline, and no fighting near our economic interests or factories." They've said this directly in person, sent messages, and they keep repeating it. End quote. So the TNLA is in a perilous position, with the Myanmar military now reaccessing Lashio to the east and the Myanmar military making steady gains from the west. The most recent fighting has been around Ganji, which the military took back from the TNLA last week, and the TNLA has now been attacking again this week. People living in TNLA territories, they suffer from regular airstrikes, with also intermittent, unverified reports of the military using chemical weapons. But amidst all these intense pressures, just this week the TNLA and its civilian wing, the Palang State Liberation Front, PSLF, along with the Ta'ang National Party and the Ta'ang Political Consultative Committee, well, they've now founded a new Ta'ang Land Council. It's led by TNLA Chair General Ike Bong, and it's part of an interim arrangement for a Ta'ang revolutionary government to administrate the towns under TNLA control. The group said that the Ta'ang Political Consultative Committee, TPCC, will maintain checks and balances between the three branches of the Ta'ang government. The TPCC was formed shortly after the coup, and it's nominally allied to the National Unity Consultative Council. This month, the TNLA also started issuing individual and household identity cards in its territories. So, to talk all things Ta'ang, to put this into perspective and context, how important is this? I'm joined in the studio by the aforementioned Francesco Buscemi and Lway Noon. Hello, Francesco.
Hello, Luke, and thank you for having me.
Hello, Noon.
Thank you, Godansi and Francesco.
Okay, the first question is for you, Francesco. You've written a forthcoming book that tells the story of the ceasefire, the disarmament, and the rearmament of the Ta'ang National Liberation Army. The title of that book is Arms Politics, Becoming and Being a Weapon in the Borderlands of Myanmar, and it's published by Cornell University Press. So I'll ask you a bit about history. How did the 1991 ceasefire between the older Palang State Liberation Army, the PLSA, how did it lead to it disbanding? And then the ascendance later of the TNLA. How did the TNLA become so powerful?
Thank you, Luke, for this question that, of course, touches upon a very long historical arc that I would say goes at least back to the 1960s. To be concise, one could think of this history as made of at least three, I would say, historical periods. So from the early 60s, when the very first forms of armed branches of the political movements that were advocating for autonomous rights for the Palang Tang minority, depending on on the perspectives and who was using the name were formed. And then that, I think, would last until the early 1990s. And then there was a period of ceasefire that formally lasted at least until 2005, when the Palang State Liberation Army, that was at the time the main the armed organization of the political movement, was officially disarmed. And actually that was the first and to my knowledge only official instance of a disarmament ceremony and process, even though many others have occurred informally in Myanmar. And then the last period, one could, I think, trace it between 2005, so the disarmament, and I would say the pre-coup period. And now we are probably entering an additional area where not only the armed branches, but also the political ones are increasingly under reconstruction, evolution, and so on and so forth. And perhaps like what we know today as the TNLA had a very formative and important moment in the decades preceding the disarmament ceremony of 2005, because those were really decades in which the situation that then will be legally consolidated into the 2008 constitution actually take form and take shape. No, so basically the idea that at least from the perspective of the Myanmar state, guided by the Bamar majorities, and especially by the Sitat, the Tatmadaw, the idea to have basically something that looked like a Bantustan, no? So like an area where you would have minorities that would be able to govern themselves, but of course with domination by state authorities anyways. And so this gets consolidated with the 2008 constitution, but at the moment of the disarmament, while up to that point still there was a sense in the political movements of the Tang minorities that at that point were basically two. So you had the previous Palang State Liberation Organization and the newly formed Palang State Liberation Front that basically kinds of rejects, or it's not really in line with the idea of having a ceasefire in 1991, and in 1992 gets formed. So and at that point, basically at the point of the disarmament, there's really the idea that the Tang minority, if left without an armed branch, probably that could also entail the loss of any political opportunity to actually change something that was really, let's say, pushed back against. So the idea of having a tiny territory in two townships, Namsan and Namtu mainly, that not only went against the agreements, the informal agreements that were there with the 1991 ceasefire, but also I would say especially was going against the main political stances and ideas about what would it mean to have a Tang autonomous area or state, or depending, no? So I would say this more or less gives a wide background. Then, of course, you have the official rearmament of this Palang State Liberation Front that up to that point had ascribed only to political struggle, and perhaps also there a bit the history of the different components of the Palang State Liberation Front may be interesting, and it's also touched upon in the book, because you had both Tang activists that had been living and had been studying, had been active in the central areas of Myanmar, Yangon, Mandalay, and so on, that with the 1988 uprisings and in its aftermath, basically leave the central areas. Something that, of course, you have seen also in the post-coup scenario. you had that, but you also had people from the Palang State Liberation Army, and I would say more broadly from Tang communities and families connected to the Palang State Liberation Army, and especially those officers that had been sent to the NDF, the coalition of rebel movements that was based in Karen areas that were living there. And then besides that, also there the long for quite some years there have been also communities living across the border. So this was more or less the milieu and the different social components that were structuring the PSLF, the Palang State Liberation Front. And with the disarmament in 2005, then slowly it starts growing up the idea that it is necessary to recreate an armed force in a context, let's say, of what is perceived to be basically a genocide being carried out in northern Shan state against Tang minorities throughout the decades of ceasefire, and of course also before.
Thanks, Francesco. Now, moving to you, Lway Noon, as a Ta'ang person yourself, for you, what's the significance of this new administration system we've heard about? And what are its challenges going to be, given the military situation and the Chinese blockades?
Thank you so much, Gutan Singh, for this question. That I would like to share the brief about the background of the administration of the PSLF, Palang State Liberation Front, and the Tang National Liberation Army, TNLA. As Francesco mentioned about the Myanmar Constitution, 2008 Constitution, Palang self-administered area was recognized only for two townships, Nasan and M2. Actually, there are living in 18 townships in Shan State. Another one is the 2015 nationwide ceasefire agreement. PSLF TNLA actively participated in the political negotiation for the nationwide ceasefire agreement since I think 2012. But at the signing of the NCA, Ta'ang and PSLF they were excluded from the nationwide ceasefire agreement. In the past, the young people were excluded and pushed back to the extremists. So that's why the young activists, young political leaders, especially youth leader, we try a lot since 63 years ago. We try a lot. 12th January 1962 is our Tang National Revolution Day. And also as your questions regarding with the administration, before 2021 military coup, BSLF has 13 departments. 13 departments regarding with the under the administration body. So focusing on the legislative, executive, and judiciary, three pillars of governance. But you know that in the past, before 1027 operation, they couldn't, control the townships completely. After the 1027 operation second part, they are controlling the 12 township plus Mongyo area. Mongyo is in the Lasho district. So outside of the Lasho town, Mongyo area is controlled by the PSLF TNLA. Take today, take tomorrow. So after the 1027 operation second part last year, so TPCC Ta'ang Political Consultative Committee, which is found by the Ta'ang political leaders and the Ta'ang civilian leaders and the PSLF TNLA leaders. So TPCC and the PSLF administration department jointly governs and the implementation local governance in the 12 townships plus Mongyo area. So on the other hand, although the TBCC tried a lot, engaged with the other ethnic leaders to build up the local governance structure, some of the EROs in the northern Shan and also in Shan State, they don't want to free from the junta. They are used to dictatorships. They didn't want to recognize the Ang. In Myanmar, the very bad thin majorization in our country, and also in Shan State also majorization. You know that most of the people knew that Palau only. Actually, there are many tribes. minimum 14 tribes in Ta'ang. If you will recognize Ta'ang, you respect all Ta'ang tribes. So minimum 14 tribes in Ta'ang. Samlong tribes is the biggest group of 14 tribes. The problem is that other 13 minority tribes, most of the majority group wants them to disappear. So we we have the united, and also we promoted the minority groups. So because of the 1027 operation and the PSLF TNLA effort, Ta'ang in northern Shan, Ta'ang in southern Shan, Ta'ang in eastern Shan, Ta'ang migrants in Thailand, so they could raise their head. They could raise their heads up in their in their community. So it meant that it's directly affected by the PSLF TNLA effort, and also indirectly affect. And as to answer your question directly, that you already seen on the media, of the TBCC webpage also, that TBCC found the DLC Ta'ang Land Council. So and also it was found in June 1st to 3rd June. So that's why the current, before TBCC found the DLC Ta'ang Land Council, TBCC and BSLF have the joint implementation in 12 townships as the local governance, health sector, education sector, civilian protection, justice sector, and including the immigration also. You mentioned that Chinese pressure. Yes, you are right. Not only Chinese pressure. So Ta'ang local civilian people are suffering a lot. Not only the airstrikes, heavy weapons, landmines, and also the chemical weapons, but also that focus by the SAC troops, the junta, and also focus by the Chinese. In our area, the local civilian, we couldn't buy the medicine because of the focus by the SAC and the focus by the Chinese. We couldn't buy the stationery for the students, and also we couldn't buy the fuel for the transportation. Very, very expensive. The most problem is the medicine. So paracetamol for the painkiller, that currently 10,000 Myanmar baht. Very, very expensive for the local people. And also there are also landmine victims a lot. And also there are victims of the heavy weapons. Although PSLF and the TBCC, that civilian government, joint government. So although they set up and they build the hospitals and the clinic, these are not enough for the civilian. Although we raise our voice to the international community and international government feeling hesitation to support to the Ta'ang civilians. Ta'ang civilian means that not only Ta'ang ethnic, because in our area, not only Ta'ang, but also the other ethnic minorities are included in our area. And also not only ethnic minorities, but also the religious minorities are also in our area. So I'm answering your question and also raising my voice to the international government. Thank you so much, Guldan Singh.
Okay, thank you, Lway Noon, for all of that. I can see. Would you like to add something, Francesco?
I would say that the main difference, or let's say transformation, evolution that I see with the current events and the events since the formation of TPCC, and in the aftermath of the coup, I think it's really the fact that you see how a lot of different either civil society or political organizations are kind of like have been working together to really start creating what to me it's like let's say, political forum representative of the social basis that form the Ta'ang movements. No, my main point also in the book, and maybe Lway Noon can can disagree, but I think that up to now the main governing or institutional body through which the Ta'ang movements had been kind of like able to produce uh, governing or governmentality apparatuses and institutions was actually the TNLA. So I think this starts being a bit of a difference where actually the TPCC somehow can be seen as an evolution of something that nonetheless characterized also the PSLF back in the 2000s. So the fact that basically it is the PSLF and the TNLA are definitely a political armed revolutionary movement, but it's always been very entangled with civil society organizations. So for the PSLF, for example, the work of TSYU, so the Ta'ang Student and Youth Union, and the Ta'ang Women Organization, or Palang Women Organization, as at its inception, it was using actually the exonym Palang. They were really, I would say, at the core of the possibility for the PSLF, and then later also PSLF TNLA, when the TNLA will be formed, to both have a bridge with the social basis and also at the same time kind of like creating, producing, yeah, let's say, institutions, governing bodies, forms of services, and so on. I wanted to add also this point that also Noon touched upon a lot, that has to do with this difference between the exonym Palang and the endonym Ta'ang. No? So Ta'ang as being the name, especially I would say since the creation of the TNLA, so especially since after the disarmament of PSLA, Ta'ang has become the main terminology through which Ta'ang people identify themselves. Now, this, of course, it's something that's in the making somehow, because also I remember a lot of people also involved in either civil society organizations or political or the TNLA also saying this thing of like a lot of people, a lot of Ta'ang people, sometimes they don't know they are Ta'ang or they don't identify, let's say, themselves as Ta'ang. This does not mean that they do not think of themselves as Ta'ang, but just that they don't use this name, Ta'ang, no? And the exonym Palang instead, so the name that has been commonly used by sometimes Bama, sometimes Shan, um, political institutions actually used to define this ethno-national minority, was always part of this system of understanding politically, but then also territorially, geographically, how the space of the country should be organized.
Okay. Now, I want to bring the conversation back to this point that Francesco is alluding to about the political structure of the Union of Myanmar and the nature of ethno-national movements. Lway Noon, you mentioned how diverse the populations in the townships controlled by the TNLA are, and also how the TNLA intimately understands problems of majoritarian rule. So I want to ask you, how inclusive is the new Ta'ang Land Council administration going to be? How is it going to overcome those challenges? There was a statement released immediately after the Ta'ang Land Council administration was announced. It was by 5 Shan civil society groups, Dai Youth. I'll read from it. It said, establishing an administrative territory after battlefield victories without the consent of local people is just colonization. So I don't think that the TNLA wants to be viewed as colonizers. So Lway Noon, how can it manage all of this?
We Myanmar people are under the structural violence by the former military junta and the current military junta. So we hate the military dictatorships. So most of the ethnic revolutionary organization and ethnic revolutionary activists, we hold together to end the dictatorship. And also like that, on the other hand, we Ta'ang, we are under the structural violence by the Burmese group, and also majority group. The time when I was joining at a university in the UK, so most of the local British people knew that. They didn't how to say hear about Ta'ang. They didn't hear the name of Ta'ang. So they didn't know Lisu ethnic. They didn't know. They knew that Kachin, Kaya, Kayin, Chin, Mon, Bama, Rakhine, Shan only. This 7 state and 7 region. So that's why that Kachin, Kaya, Kayin, Chin, Bama, Mon, Rakhine, Shan, they owned Myanmar only. So it meant that they didn't know, they didn't recognize ethnic minorities, but they knew about the Rohingya. Because of the Rohingya activists are, how to say, they try to approach to the international community and the Westerns. So that's why the Westerners and the international community knew about Rohingya. So although 135, they also mentioned on the Google or something like that, there are 135 ethnic minorities in Myanmar. So majorities are Kachin, Kaya, Kayin, Bama, Mon, Rakhine, Shan. It was the like as the divide and rule policy and the divide and rule in the ethnic people by the Burmese majority group. So that's why that we try a lot. So since 1962 January 12th January, we want to be a human. We want to be included in the Myanmar people. So that's why that we try our best. We try a lot because you know that we hate the victim cycle. We are trying to destroy the victimized cycle because we were victimized in the past. We want to get the human rights. So in our local civilians people, they didn't get the even basic human rights. They didn't get. They are in the civil war, airstrikes, and the heavy weapons, and the drones by the junta. So that's why that to answer your questions, the inclusivity. So we try our best. TBCC, TLC, PSLF, TNLA, and the governance, the current civilian governance, we try our best. So you know that you mentioned that the statement of the Thai youth. So I don't want to blame them. We Shan, Dang, Kachin, and Lisu, and Tamil, and also Muslim. We are living on the mountainous region in our same area. We need to love each other. We need to support each other. No? So after the 1227 operation second part, to build up the local governance, local government, we try our best. We persuaded to the local community, local people. So that's why there are 7 townships of 13 townships. There are the, how to say, a township level committee uh, to manage and to to reduce the conflict in our to reduce the intercommunal conflict in this area. In this township committee, there are, how to say, ethnic minorities are included in, and also ethnic how to say religious minorities are included in. You know that is these 6 township committee, Kachin civilian leaders are included in. Lisu civilian leaders are included in. Muslim leaders are included in. Ta'ang civilians are leaders are included in. Burmese civilian leaders are included in. And defectors who were CDMers, defectors are included in. Ethnic people are, how to say, included in the Ta'ang Land Education Council, which is the Ministry of Education of the Ta'ang Land. And also they are also included in the health sectors, also justice sector also, but not much percentage like Ta'ang. I can answer your question that we are trying our best, but we are not perfect. So every day, every hour, and every minute, We try our best to all inclusive according to our non-discrimination policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lway Noon. Now, for you, Francesco, is that music to your ears? Do you see this inclusivity challenge as the main challenge for the Ta'ang administration?
Like in a short line, I would say that one of the most interesting elements or dimensions of the whole, I would say, trajectory of the Tang movement, being a minority of the minorities, as many minorities of the minorities say in Myanmar. I think the most interesting dimension or element has often been the kind of like the overcoming of this linkage between communal forms of identity, no, and territory, and let's say bounded territory, bounded administrative territory on the other. Now, of course, like the latest developments kind of like seem to speak uh, against this, in the sense that like the TPCC, the Ta'ang Land Council, and so on, and the new institutions and the TNLA have long worked to basically also like make and produce something that has like, you know, like a bounded or bordered territorial autonomy somehow. But at the same time, I think in a lot of these developments, there's always also somehow the refusal of this, no? And I think in this sense, for example, while of course there has been a lot of friction and tension, and also sometimes conflicts with different ethno-national movements, at the same time, I think it's true that in all of these forms, and not only the TPCC or the Ta'ang Land Council, I also think about, for example, KNDF in Karenni and the Karenni Political Consultative Council. No, all of these new forms after the coup, especially, I think are moving a bit forward in terms of kind of like creating local forms of government, or at least, let's say, local forms of, let's say, managing and living together. That somehow at least really make an effort to start from the bottom up. Then this, of course, doesn't obscures, let's say, the problems that always exist on the ground. And so this main element that I find that I've always found very interesting in the trajectory of the Tang movement, I think has to be contextualized. Like the two main forms of conflict in Myanmar, so democratization and demilitarization of state institutions, one, but also the question of, okay, what form do we give to the post-colonial state, no, after 1948, and so the idea of federalization and creating autonomous forms of administration and managing locally. These two forms of conflict necessarily always have to be kind of like contextualized and brought back to something like, let's say, a dialectic, a process between, on the one hand, very radical practices of living and of doing politics. I think of anti-racist, anti-colonialist, feminist no projects and practices of living, essentially. And on the other hand, really reactionary projects. So like the first thing that comes to mind is the Sittat and the Tatmadaw and the authoritarian regimes, let's say, or also the semi-democratic or semi-authoritarian setup of the 2015-2020 more or less period. But at the same time, like, to be frank, oftentimes also the ethno-nationalist projects of some of the political armed movements, no? By some, I don't necessarily mean some more than others, but I just mean that this has existed and still exists throughout the movements, no? This is not to generalize in one direction or another. And then I think, of course, that we have seen two main ways in which these reactionary projects have worked. You know, so on the one hand, militarization and the deployment of military violence. And also, on the other hand, let's say the politicization and the polarization of some communal identity traits. No, it can be religion, Buddhism, or different forms, patriarchy and male domination, or yeah, sexist ideologies, or sometimes it's been especially ethno-nationalism. No, so I say this because I think that what's really different for me of the last years, and especially these ones, and probably also looking forward. I know maybe sometimes they may seem negligible, but like pushes and transformations in an opposite direction, in a direction that goes more towards inclusiveness, not just in the sense of multiculturalism, but also in the sense of kind of like transforming these reactionary projects that have really oppressed people for a long while.
Well, there's a lot to think about there, and to be honest, Lway Noon and Francesco, we could end the episode right there. But since you're both here, we've got the time. I want to seek your responses to maybe just an evaluation I'll make. I mean, if we think about the TNLA in the Spring Revolution, and thanks for your wider points there, Francesco. But now, if we think about it more strategically or militarily, the TNLA is very popular within the revolution and, with People's Defence Forces. It's considered to be walking the walk. It's not just talking the talk. It's staying strong against Chinese pressure. It's maintaining its dignity, unlike the MNDAA. But rumours keep swirling. Earlier this week, the Democratic Voice of Burma claimed that, or reported that the TNLA had told PDFs to abandon their positions around Nangcho, and a source said the TNLA was going to give Nangcho back to the military. Then there were also more rumours that the MNDAA might withdraw from Seni town, which, might leave the TNLA further exposed to land attacks from SAC forces, like what's happening in Lashio. And there are also these constant tensions and reports of violence and disagreements between the Kachin Independence Army and the TNLA. We haven't really mentioned those yet. So basically, the TNLA seems so resilient, but there are a lot of uncertain pressure points that indicate at least the military status quo might be untenable. So that's a big question for both of you. What do you think?
Okay, before I answer the Kodasin question, that I would like to share you that PSLF TNLA have the alliance, three group alliance, and the many bilateral alliance, including you mentioned that the Burmese revolutionary groups, including the NUG. So the first one group alliance is that FPNCC, Federal Political Consultative Committee, led by USA. FPNCC focused the political strategy. And the second one, PSLF TNLA group alliance is that Northern Alliance, TNLA, AA, MNDAA, and KIA. And also the another one, the last one group alliance is Three Brother Alliance. You already know that MNDAA, AA, and TNLA. And also another bilateral alliance with the EROs, Ethnic Resistance Organization, and the Federal Council also. And also on the other, I think you already heard about the a little bit clashes between KIA soldiers and the TNLA, and the MNDA soldiers and the TNLA on ground. So, but they could, they could engage, they could discuss and solve this conflict. So that's why in the future, they could collaborate each other, they could support each other. In the past also, KIA also supported PSLF, and also on the other hand, also KIA supported AA. So I could say that northern EROs, they help each other, they support each other. So anyhow, we all are not, we all are not perfect. So as I'm the Ta'ang women activists, we engage with the Ta'ang leaders. I also engage with the Ta'ang leaders, and I pointed out some kinds of, needs of the Ta'ang governance, Ta'ang government, and the Ta'ang political leaders and the PSLF in the community. So I raise my voice to them. So like me, Ta'ang activists and the Ta'ang youth, we raise our voice, and we are contributing our capacity, our time, and energy and our aspiration. So as my point of view is not focusing on the bad situation. So that's why that I hoped and I believe in the future so that the EROs could collaborate each other more and more. We all dislike the military dictatorships. We have the common objectives. So that's why although we have a little bit internet conflict, but we hoped and we expect and we believe that we could engage and we could discuss and for the future.
Great. Lway Noon, I can certainly understand that perspective. That leaves the last word with you, Francesco.
Just connecting to what you were mentioning in your question or the way you phrased it, no? So, is this situation tenable and durable? Also from a military point of view. I think there are three main dimensions. One has to do with how PSLF, TNLA, and now, as we see more broadly, also the growing bottom-up political bodies and forums will be able to integrate, but also build upon and also develop educational, let's say, infrastructures and programs and capacity and so on and so forth. I don't mean this necessarily in terms of course, also in terms of like how many people will you be able to send to school. Of course, this is not only important, but also important in the lives of people. But I think about this also in terms of how the organizations will be able to transform, change, to bring, really transformative change to move a bit beyond what the revolution goes against and criticizes, rightly so. Then the second dimension, I think, has to do with how the organization, and maybe here, as Noon was saying, I think more about the TNLA per se, being I mean, to date at least, the main, if not the only, armed movement in these areas besides PDFs that coordinate with the TNLA. It will be about how they will navigate these two kind of like points or dimensions that were also present in the words of Tarpanla that you look reported at the beginning. So the fact that it's clear that around some areas, junctures, corridors, and so on, it's better if there is not conflict, or if there is not change, or if there is not destabilizing change, and so on. And this, of course, I think will be. I mean, regarding this, it will be important how the TNLA manages to navigate the alliances that it has, militarily, of course, but also politically, because I think, again, another interesting aspect of the TNLA, it's been that throughout the past almost 2 decades, has always been doing this. So it has always been um, carrying out a certain political project, and then having also alliances that perhaps both allowed that political project, but also allowed the existence of the organization, and also allowed for it to have its own view that not always necessarily overlaps or coincides with all the alliances that it has. And then the third point, I think also, and I don't really know how to formulate this, but I think it will be very important to see how the, let's say, I will call it outreach or international connections of the organization develop. Because we're talking about like political movements that don't have, for example, an element that it's present in other ethno-nationalist movements in Myanmar, that is the diaspora dimension, no? Nonetheless, on the other hand, there are also in these movements also like the young sections of them that, of course, are thinking of progressively, are thinking of the revolution since 2021 as something that it's in a global context. No, this I had the chance to hear both from some Ta'ang people that I met in Karenni, but also people in Karenni that were related to the Ta'ang movement and so on, that were connecting their struggle to, I don't know, for example, Rojava or Palestine as well. And I think this will be important in terms of, okay, maybe also materially in terms of like, are we able to also get support in different forms that comes from the outside? Are we able to maybe, who knows, in the future think about something that it's like a boycott yeah, like a boycott movement of different form, that it's not merely at the scale of Myanmar or at the scale of the northern areas of Thailand, you know? So I think this will also be important. And somehow I think touches back also onto that point that you were talking about on isolation and the danger of being militarily isolated. No, I think you were referring to.
Those are great concluding thoughts, Francesco. And the global side makes me think of Jeffrey Wasserstrom's new book on the Milk Tea Alliance that I think is out just this week. And you know, those global connections we don't really talk enough about on this show. But you can't do everything all the time. And I really appreciate both of you being able to join us for a, Ta'ang-focused episode of what's happening in Myanmar. Thank you for making the space for it and for all of your opinions and thoughts.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Good dancing. I'm Francesco.
Now, very quickly, because we are running out of time, we're over time, in fact, this episode. Thanks to you, the listeners, for tuning in again and for catching up with what's happening in Myanmar. Don't forget to check out all the new content on the Frontier website. There are 2 new features up since the last episode. One's about the Arakan Army's offensive east out of Rakhine State, and the other is about how the SAC is using advanced technology to screen travellers at checkpoints, which has led to many more arrests recently. But until next week, let me say farewell and take care.